is where Pele flew from Oahu, from Kauai to Oahu, yeah? But not until after she met Lohiau, her honey. And the third pu'u up there is Pu'u Hinahina, for the silver gray moss that lives up there. It's a beautiful lookout. Pu'u Opai, Pu'u Kapele, and Pu'u Hinahina. Those three pu'u cones, cinder cones, up there that mark that trail. And you can see them from far out at sea, as you know, those of you who come across from Lehua. Polihale, oh my goodness, there's so many efforts that are going on now with the families who are from this area of Polihale. They really ask people not to drive on the sand dunes because there are burials in them. And there are many efforts, you know, to maintain the rare plants that there, and that's Maitamatas kuleana, is the plants, that beautiful plants that grow in that area along this coast. Maintain the beauty of it. I know that you all have seen July of last year, or a year and a half, or 2 years ago now. There were so many cars. We came around on the Zodiac going to Nualolo, and I couldn't believe my eyes because there were solid cars from Nohili all the way down here to the cliff, to the Pali. And it was locals, you know, because we had no tourists then. It's like, oh my goodness. And sure enough, though, when we came out, we saw too much opala. And that really, really upset the families who are from this area. So they have been making a concerted effort to get the message out, to malama this place, and take care of it, because it is so incredibly beautiful. And so many sites along here. They took us to, I had never been to there's a hula platform right up here, right up there. And it's covered with giave. Oh my God, don't go up barefoot or slippers, you gotta wear boots. But there's a concerted effort of the families here from this side to malama this area. I'm gonna pass this on to Mike, who's gonna talk about the plants of this area.
So it's hard to tell, obviously, from being out at sea like this, but the Polihale dune system is an important. All the islands had big sand dune systems with native coastal, what they call strand vegetation, and over generations, over thousands of years, the plants and water interact, where the sand will solidify and become what they call lithified. So there's solid rock, sandstone dunes running all the way around that used to run right down to Kekaha. So obviously, coastal sites are really important because that's where people want to build houses and all that. So on all the islands, a lot of the coastal dune systems were pulverized and destroyed. And it's happening slowly out here with all the all-terrain vehicles. For some reason, they feel the need to just drive up on all these lithified sand dunes. And it is just sand, even though it looks like rock, and slowly break it down. And so the plants that are evolved to live out here are slowly becoming less and less common. The dune systems have a very unique plant life. Right in this stretch inside here, there are some plants that are so rare that they're less than 25 in existence. They're the ones, though, that create the dunes. As I said, if you hike out here and you find, we were out here with the Kauai Native Plant Society last year, and I was pointing it out to them. There are some morning glories that grow in the sand where you barely see them. The leaves are really tiny. The flowers are white with a yellow throat. That when they're in flower, that's when you really notice them. But you'll notice them. You can find them because you'll see a mound of sand amongst all this kind of shifting sands, and that one little plant and its root system holds the sand in place. So the more we destroy the plant life that's out here, the less the dunes will be able to be stabilized. But if you were to go down further to where the sand ends and the talus slope begins, there's one plant that's still grows down there. It's called Mai'apilo. It's in the caper family, so it's related to capers. You ever eat salted capers with your seafood and all that? So this is a very closely related. The little buds do look like those capers, which need to be prepared, but it flowers at night, big white flowers, and it's really, really fragrant. And the reason I bring it up is, I've been out to Nualolokai plenty of times, and on occasion when the winds are really light, even on the Zodiac, you can smell them from the ocean. So if you ever catch like pomade, it's kind of sweet, kind of oily, rich fragrance, kind of hard to describe, but if you're ever coming out here one morning and you catch a whiff of what smells like a flower, it's very likely Mai'apilo, because they're big shrubs of them hanging off the cliffs all the way around to past Nu'ololokai. So that, if anything, that's the one thing that will connect you from the ocean to the land, is the fragrance of Mai'apilo. Now the fruit looks like little cucumbers, and so Mai is a banana, and pilo is any aroma or fragrance that's kind of strong. It's not necessarily bad, but it is a strong fragrance. And so the fruit, when they ripen, they do kind of have an orange color to them, and they're very pungent. But as a plant in the environment, they're really important because they provide. There's a few native moths that lay their eggs on the Mai'apilo leaves, and so they're important as part of the ecosystem. You know, we don't have any native forest birds at the coastline anymore, but there's still plenty of native insects, and there are a lot of moths that are important. The other thing that's important here, Saber was mentioning some of these valleys. Ha'eleele and Ka'awaiki is here. Ha'eleele, near here, is the point where the spirits came out and leapt into Po, or the afterlife. And so this is one of the areas. Every island has one. This area is known for that. And if you know the story, you know Pele. Saber mentioned the volcano goddess Pele came to Kauai because she heard the sound of hula from the Big Island, from her volcano, and her spirit was drawn here, which is where in Ha'ena she met Lohiau and fell in love with him, and eventually had to go back and sent her sister Hi'iaka to fetch Lohiau to take him back there. So when Hi'iaka, long story, but on her way out, she came through here, and the spirits that's supposed to leap into Po, into the afterlife, not all of them make the jump. And so this area in Hawaiian legend was known for having spirits just roving around. They were called E'epa, and they were mischievous usually. And of course, they see the goddess, the younger sister of the volcano goddess, coming through. They were, hell bent, so to speak, to stop her from taking Lohiau. So she kind of, she was able to destroy them and clear the path for them to continue on. Barking Sands, the sound that you used to be able to hear at Barking Sands, and it's called that, are the spirits in the sand making that sound. So that's the history of where Barking Sands and where that sound comes from.
One other mo'olelo I thought I'd just quickly share is one of the families from down here, when we were talking about Limu, she said her tutu was famous for wearing a white dress whenever she was down here. And I thought, oh, how smart, yeah, wear a white dress on the hot sand, yeah. Nowadays, many people wear all the bikinis and whatnot, but white dress cover you from the sun, refract the sun from you. How smart our tutus were. She said, but she was so commonly down here, and she was a holo, a woman of the sea, but the bottom of her dress would be almost like a green tinge from spending so much time near the Lemo Pahapaha o Polehale. It dyed the bottom of her dress. They also found that later on she also had kind of an affair with the kai, and perhaps a relationship with the ocean, so much so that her dress, I'll let you go figure what I'm talking about, her dress turned green on top of her stomach as well. So that was another mo'olelo from here. And I thought one more thing I'll mention about the kai for you folks is, probably as you come out of the harbor right away, especially during this time of the year, and as you're coming down the coast, you come across all the Kanaloas, yeah? All the body forms of Kanaloa. So the whales, the nai'a, the sila, and all of that, yeah? On the Hawaiian, it's hard to define it. It can be Christian and Hawaiian and whatnot. It's nothing, no anything, but anyhow. On kind of our historical side, a thought about Kanaloa is those forms are representations of him, yeah? Kanaloa, the sea god, yeah? And we're in Keaupolehi, we're in the time of Kanaloa right now, yeah? Where he is most abundant and reflective. He and Kane are very prevalent during this time of the year, yeah? But when these Kanaloa are coming out, like, so should you see dolphins and Niihau or Kohola jumping out, some of the historical thought is that that's Kanaloa's face coming to you. He's going aloha healo, heaka heaka, as a chant goes, he aloha healo, heaka heaka. I'm coming to your face, Kanaloa. I see you. So when he's jumping out, or she, or if he's in his she form, if it's a mother whale or something, they're coming aloha healo. Kanaloa is coming from the deeps of the ocean and bringing, and there's one, just one goes say hello to me, coming out to say hello to you, and from the depths of his world down there, which you can almost kind of feel sometimes when you're seeing them coming out, like they're bringing the depths of the ocean to you, and for a minute in time you see the deep of Kanaloa. Does that make sense? Yeah. Hey. Oh yeah. And migrated out to Ha'ena. We're one of the last Kuleana families in Ha'ena area. So if you know Limuholi Stream, cold pond where everybody loves to swim, that's actually a family pond we call Hawa. It used to be down below, and our family used to bathe there. And when they built the road, it came on the other side. But I'm getting a little sidetracked. But I thought I'd tell a quick story of our family and some history of this side. As you folks know, Ha'ena and all of that area is very, very famous for a multitude of things. But of course, in terms of maybe some things you might share with our visitors, of course, is the Pele and Hi'iaka saga and how she migrated and then came back, where she migrated here. And not many people know that this is the remnants of her first ili, when she put her pa'oa, her stick. She had that magical stick. Do you guys remember that about Pele? She was born in Kahiki, in Tahiti, and when she was a child, her kahuhanai, her uncle gave her a stick, a magical stick, that had some powers that allowed her to dig. She already embodied power, but of this nature, but the stick just drove it in even more and allowed her to dig volcanoes and play with fire in that sense. Oh, sorry, distracted. You guys see the limu over there? That's the limu ele. You see them over there? How pretty, yeah? So kind of that color of her dress would have been at Polehale. Anyway, sidetracked. Limu. So when Pele comes out from Kahiki, she flees Kahiki, and she's leaving her sibling Namaka'okaha'ia, and she's abandoning her because they're at war with each other. She accidentally lights her home on fire in Kahiki as a small teenager learning how to use her pa'oa, and it makes her sister very mad, and she accidentally blew up her house and her home, and she's kind of abandoned, Her sister's mad, everybody's mad, so she leaves Kahiki, comes up to Hawaii, and she's with her brother Kamoha'i, and they come up through Niihau, Niihau, all of those islands, northwestern, and then the first place she tries to kind of eli and make a home for herself, a volcanic home for herself, is this area of Ha'ena. Not many people know that this is the remnants of that. So all these caves are the remnants of that volcanic activity, and we find it true, on the geological side, that at one point there was a significant crater. Most of it has gone away and subsided under the sea with erosion and so forth, but what does remain is these volcanic tubes, and There are certain spots along this coast right here. My tutus were all fishermen of this area, and just one still goes. But they talk about areas where you can smell the sulfur. Have you guys had any of those experiences before around these tubes? Especially when Kilauea is going off, the volcanic tubes still have some kind of connection to the tubes on Hawaii, and you smell this sulfur smell. So if you're ever near these tubes, and you smell that smell, another place you smell it in Kahili River in Kilauea. If you're fishing in the river like mullet, you smell it sometimes in that corner. There's that one corner kind of smell like tiko, like not good smell, like someone used the bathroom. Huleia River right in the pond has that smell. In Alekoko has a volcanic tube. Anyway, don't be surprised when Pele is going off. Sometimes around these tubes you smell that sulfur smell. But it's because this was all remnants of her home, yeah? And she comes back later on. She's not successful here in the Makau Kahai winds, and she follows her from Tahiti and is determined to ruin her life like she ruined hers. So she puts her kai over here and blows out her volcanic tube. And so in the Maka winds, and she goes on to Nihoku and Kilauea and then Nomilu, yeah? A chant talks about that. Inomilu Ipawo aha, and she digs her kind of stick is that she bears, and it's a stick that starts fire, yeah? She carries it along through the Hawaiian Islands, and as we know right now, she's still successful in Hawaii at Kilauea, and she resides there, yeah? But this is one of her first places. As children, we weren't really allowed to go to too many of these caves when I'd go holo holo with my uncles. Most of them are pretty sacred, and they have some pretty sacred stories, but some also like there's one, I won't say where, but you probably know there's a couple moi holes at a few of these, but you can go figure where stay. But our family was famous for fishing those areas as well, but they didn't really maho'oi too deep in the caves, because we all know that a lot of our kupuna are buried in caves like that. And if you should go through them, it's with great respect, yeah? Iaka, if you're gonna go on a Pele tangent or so, and you have guests that are really interested in learning more about Pele and Iaka, there's the Hula Halawa course at KA, and that's where the first hula was done out there, and it's here in these valleys that Hi'iaka takes a lot of enjoyment of the food and the abundance of particularly the luau and ho'io. She only ate greens. Not many people know she was vegan, but she was, because of her status and what her kuleana was, she ate and she enjoyed the greens of ha'ena and hanakapiai, and as far as into kalalau. So should you read some more about that, you find out about her ono and the onos of this valley. But anyway, I thought I'd share one more story before maybe I share it with Auntie Sabra. We have an ancestor that comes in. You're welcome to share this story. I don't mind. So I share it with you, and I don't mind you share with others. But just to kind of share the migration and what was happening, we were just having a whole conversation about how much people must have lived in these valleys. And something I do know is our family was journeying back and forth pretty often, and most of the death and marriage certificates and birth certificates in our ohana say either ha'ena or kalalau, that they were married or born in kalalau and so forth. And they migrated back and forth pretty oftenly. Our family supposedly created the mule, the horse, the mule. in Kanaloa Valley. I had an ancestor who would raise horse in there, and over time, what he would do is he put up the burlap rice bag or burlap bag over the horse to bring it out. This is part of his livelihood, was raising horses and then bringing it out, and they were prime horses, yeah? People wanted them, so he raised them in Kanaloa, bring them out. Put the bag over the eye so they could carry it on the trail, and they would only come out, bring the horse out at night because couldn't see at night, yeah, and it wouldn't get spooked if the bag came off or so. But over time they learned, they tried the mule, breed the donkey and the horse, and the mule came out beautiful, you know, and it could hike the trail. So the first mules was in Kanaloa. Not many people knew that's where the mule started, was in there. The ancestors on our family that started that mule was a man by the name of Hailama and William Kihapi Lanikini. They were raising them in there in the 1800s. But our family traveled back and forth. People were going back and forth all the time, just like Lehua and Kapa'a, and you know, driving back and forth, going back and forth. It was common, yeah, to share resources, to travel back and forth. And apparently, one Hailama, our ancestor, his first name was Niihau. He came from the island of Niihau. As a child, he was evicted in the 1800s when the first kind of presence and wave of different forces were taking over the islands of Niihau. Some say during Luna Lilo's time, there were 2 boys that were evicted. He brought off the island, and that was him and his brother Pa'amawi. They're evicted from Niihau, and first brought to Niihau for a little while, and then brought to Kanaloa. So every time I'm hiking or with my kids here in the summer, I just think about what it must have been like as a young teenager, just dropped off here, evicted from your home, and trying to find resources here, and providing for yourself as a child, yeah. And apparently he met my grandmother sometime in his opio, my great-great-grandmother in his opio time in his teenage years. And they started a relationship in Kanaloa. They married in Kanaloa. And he started his horse and cattle business and so forth in there. But one thing that was very commonly recorded about, sorry, one more thing. You see what I was telling you about? The limo over there. It's green, yeah, because there's waterfall, yeah, fresh water. So the limo paha o palehale will not grow without the fresh water. So anytime you see that green limo, you know there's a spring or there's a waterfall. So sorry, sidetracked. Limo. But anyhow, so he came from Niihau and he married in Kanaloa, and every story anyone told me about this man, they said he was an unusual man. The people of Niihau were unusual beings, and if you've ever been out there, you would figure so that people raised on that aina, and they're capable of many things, yeah. So he came out here, and he somewhere on this coast first learned apparently out here at Araneki or Kamaile the art of oahi. So the spear throwing, the firebrands. I'm sure you folks tell this story of the firebrands at the points here. So he did that. And the first places he learned was in here. He was from the island of Niihau. Then they married, and they ended up in Haena, and it was him and my great-grand-uncle, La'amai Kahiki, that were the last ones to do it in 1924 at Makana in Haena. So that's the kind of people that journeyed these places, people that could Kolokolopali could climb cliffs, could travel in unusual ways. Nowadays we travel where the ground is nice to walk and we make good paths, but the people who traveled these valleys, they were quite unusual people and capable of so many things. You imagine running a business in Kanaloa and bringing back and forth your herd, and my son's a cowboy, and I can't imagine, I talk to him all the time. I thought, could you imagine driving cattle from Kanaloa all the way out to Ha'ena and then to the docks, Hanalei. So, in Hawaiian you say u'ia, meaning the handsomeness of someone's capability too, not only u'ia on the outside, but handsome on the inside too, So that was her interpretation of the fire, and so that's why all the songs in Hawaiian reference love too, and burning, and you've been scorched by the fire, or burn me by the fire of love, Why not? If they're that handsome, Auntie.
A pillow growing on the cliffs right there. I don't see any flowers. Yeah, it's not in flower right now. Normally, it only blooms at night, but because we're still in the shadow of the mountain, those flowers would still be wide open and fragrant until the sun gets to them, and then they fade, and new flowers open every night while they're in the flowering season. So yeah, all along here, there's some more coming up. If you see, just from the plant part of it, if you see any sort of grayish shrubs on these cliffs, then that would be the ahinahina, which is kind of a small woody shrub. It likes these dry cliffs. I used to see more of them than I do now. There's a bunch at the Kanaloa River mouth, for example. So if you're looking on these cliffs, sometimes they're all by themselves in the middle of nowhere out of the black rock. When we were back there at Honolulu, there's this one big black cliff. We were pointing out Space Rock, but a really rare plant that was well known from the Napali Coast was a native lobeliad called alula. You can see them in the stores these days, but alula was known from Napali as well as from Mount Haupu, and it's believed extinct in the wild. But at Honolulu, that one big black cliff below Space Rock is where the last documented plant in the wild was. And I was trying to find it, but it's a small plant on a huge cliff, so I couldn't make it out. I've seen pictures of it, but sadly, it's there's just one left in the wild, and it's in a really inaccessible part of that black cliff back there.
It used to have a pretty sizable population, but whenever I bring my students to this area, we go up there at the top at the lookout, and they do this chant to Kanaloa. O Kalalau palia ala, o ie la eya, ke a ko ia e la, e ka wahine la eya, a ala ka pali, I ka lawa e la eya, I hono puhu vai aloha, aloha o e la eya, aloha o e la eya. So as Leigh was telling you, she had Ohana who lived here, and my goodness, raised cattle, and took those cattle down that trail all the way to Ha'ena. And for those of you who have hiked that trail, I mean, personally, I cannot imagine taking horses, cattle along that trail. It's just so narrow, and it's really spooky in a couple places, There at Honopu, I want you to know that there are burials in those sand dunes, which is why we really do not want anybody sliding down the sand dunes, because then we get the call saying, "Oh, Auntie, the Evie, the bones have been eroded." Came down this ridge, and there was a rope ladder. If you go to our website at napalicoast.org, you will see the rope ladder, pictures of the rope ladder from the early 1900s. And the name of this ridge here on the left is Alapi'i. Alapi'i means to climb up. Alapi'i is a ladder. All right. We have we have done some archaeological work and clearing in Nualolo Aina on the left, and the Lo'i up there, all these terraces. It's just amazing how these places were built and how they carried the supplies, the taro that they grew, and the sweet potato to the max, and kalo in the stream over this ridge. And the trail is actually very well worn. I've only gone on it to a certain point and then gone back and then, come down and swim back around. The tallest peak there is called Kamaile. Kamaile was the chiefess of this land. So my first trip into Nualolokai was just a few weeks before Hurricane Iniki, so in 1992. And our purpose was to return the ancestral remains that came from this place. This was the result of work that was done by Halialoha Ayau and Hui Manama, which was an organization to care for ancestral remains. All these 30 plus years, Eddie Halialoha Ayau is still working, and he just recently brought back ancestral remains from museums in Europe. Okay, so the whole purpose is to restore them to their place of origin. So there are many, many burials in the cliffs and in the sand. And when we came in, it was so overgrown. And we camp underneath the pine trees over there. And after an Ava ceremony, the men took the iwi up and returned them to the caves, the cliffs. There are still many burials in the cliffs over here. And sometimes the birds will go in and they will kick out, the bones and the kapa. Very, very fine kapa. And so we just pick them up and try to restore them. But to climb that cliff, whoa! We haven't, I don't know how they did it. They must have had ropes that came down from the top, because it's just amazing how far they went to secure the remains of the ancestors in here. Recently, last summer, the goat herd was really down, and I hope I encourage them to hunt, take the goats out. And we've worked with Mike and the Botanical Garden to establish a canoe plant garden here. We got permission from state parks to fence off a 1/6 of an acre, but within that 1/6 of an acre, there are many, many more plants growing here that the goats would otherwise eat and get rid of. So that work is continuing. If you have never landed here, I want you to land here, because they have beautiful. It's a village. There are many, many rock walls. There are burials, Christian burials out in the flat area, and they all face east. They all face the puka there, where the X is, where Pele put the X. And hundreds of people actually lived here. Hundreds of people lived along the coast, if not thousands. And they were very well protected, actually. And we also have stories of the ohana from Niihau coming over in the summertime and going back and forth between Niihau and Kanaloa, Niihau and Napali, Niihau and Miloli'i. The families, travel back and forth by canoe. Wonderful resources, wonderful place. I love this place very much. The Hawaiian story is that Pele marked that cliff. She put the X in it, Well, she formed these islands, so she was all part of that. But Chuck Blake can really give you a good geological background on how it was formed. But it's fascinating because it uplift, and then there was an earthquake, and this part of the island, there was a crack and shift. And when you look at the oceanography, when you look at the geology underneath here, there's a big shelf out here, that was part of this pulley as well. Many, many more stories. Loli'i is to twist the olona fibers. Now, olona was highly, highly prized. We don't have too much of it growing, but at Limahuli, lei, At Limahuli, you guys are replanting it, Lei. That rope was so prized that the whalers And the explorers would come here to Miloli'i just to trade for that rope because it's so super strong. I've never had enough. I've never had it to work with. You know, I would like to have it to work with. But there at Limuhuli, they are clearing areas because it likes to grow by stream. It likes water, and it is a super important plant. Miloli'i. Population in these valleys substantial. I mean, maybe 50, 60, 7,500. You know, I mean, Kanaloa, 100, easy, maybe even 200. It's been years since I've walked in the back of the valley, but there are village sites all over there. And there are lo'i and places to grow things all over there, you know. And that was when they had the trail up to the top. Yeah, but that trail has pretty much fallen down. But I think some people still try to take that trail, but it's so not good, dangerous. Fall down, you know. Nuololo, when you come down Nuololo Avavapuhi, you can go to the point. You see, it's kind of like a saddle that goes out to Kamaili. Hey, but from there it's sketchy. May this food nourish our bodies, but keakua, may the aloha that we have one for another nourish our beings, our souls, our uhane. O kaino o kahaku, a me kikeiki, a me kahemolele. Amene, amene, Thank you, Lord.
Those of you who do this run, you look into the cave, and that's where the Kuhai Moana's younger son, Kukai'iki, lives. So it's pretty famous. If you talk to a lot of the Niihauans, they'll tell you, you know, they do see big sharks on their side of the island all the time. And it's because, and there are stories about this, Kuhai Moana protects everyone that lives on these islands. And so there are legends about other shark gods that have come up from the south that would see Hawaiians swimming or surfing or whatnot, and kind of set their sights on wanting to eat them, and Kuhai Moana would eat them himself. He would slaughter them and eat them to protect his people. So again, Kukai'iki. So the cave is called Ana Kukai'iki, which is the cave of that god. The summit is called Kaunuakala, which refers to the sun. And there aren't too many more. The spring I was talking about, the artesian spring, which is past, if you go back that way, as you're passing where the weather port was, there's an overhang and a small cave just above the waterline, and there is a spring inside of there, and that's called Waihunau Pau'o, which there's a spring on Niihau with the exact same name. And Pau'o, the other word for that, the other Hawaiian way to say that word is Pano'o, which is a fish, and it's mud skipper. It's the stuff you see along on the reefs that kind of skip along on the limu. It's named for that. And when I went into the cave for the first time, they were all in there, kind of getting away from me, doing exactly what they're known to do. But it's a well-known sort of a wahipana. The other thing that I can kind of point out for you is that there is an ahu, or sort of an altar. I think it's a ku'ula, a fishing shrine, on the point that's just down here. It's kind of hard to make out from here. It's kind of overgrown now, and the birds are nesting on it. But it was clearly, you know, a fishing shrine, I'm sure, that the Niihauans would have used. I have been here when Niihauans have come over on their boats. They'll throw a net in the cave. I think it's really interesting that I've not ever seen sharks in that cave, but I have seen eagle rays, just schools of them going in and out. And, you know, they're all related, right? So, you know, I've never jumped in the water over there either, so I didn't want to push my luck. Niihau is on the other side. My wife is Nani, for those of you who have met Nani. She's from Niihau. We have another cousin on board whose parents were from Niihau, too. Wait. Grace. So, as we look across that way, and I'm sure you've gotten a lot of the stories about Niihau from the Robinsons and all, but when the Niihau barge comes, and I have seen it when being on Lehua, the beach to the left is Nanina, the rocky point is Poleho, and then the beach on the right is Ka'oku. And they used to run cattle, they used to load the cattle on their barges at these beaches, as well as this is where the Niihau supply barge will pull in if it's calm enough. If it's really rough, then they go to Ki'i. And there used to be a house at Ki'i. One of the Robinsons' houses was there. Ki'i was one of the spots where there was a big trough for water, because there's a spring. So at Pani'au, which is the very top flat part where the radar station is, there's a spring up there, Ka'ali, which percolates. It oozes up and percolates back down through the cliffs, and then at the base of the cliff is where they pump water to fill the big trough for the cattle on this side of the island. So the last of the rare native plants that were ever documented here were on that cliff, including the native palm, the native fan palm, the native Prochardia,
the Lolu, or as the Niihauans call it, Habane, and there's supposed to still be 2 left. According to Keith Robinson, the 2 are still there. If you go down the coastal ways, there were a couple of more. It was rare even when it was first discovered, but there were a few more down the coastal ways. So, we talk about how dry everything is, but there are still a lot of springs all over Niihau and on Lehua, where all the akulikuli is growing, all that really green matting vegetation. Yeah, that's akulikuli. It's a succulent that's found on all of our coastlines in all of Hawaii. But you'll look, it's kind of dry now. I can't get over how dry out it's already gotten. But on a typical year, you'll see the seeps where it's wet, and there are layers of seeps all the way up, about halfway up the island. And we think that if we start to plant the native fan palm from Niihau here, and our timing is good, if the roots can work their way down and find those seeps up further, that will keep them alive. Because native fan palms grow on Niihau Island, which is just like Lehua. It's roughly the same size. It's really isolated, but there's a whole grove of the native fan palms up there as well.